Ladies and gentlemen, as outlined in the conclusion of the previous learning unit, we will now dive right into the last learning unit for the module LOSC 5122, which is Purchasing Services and Supply Development. Suppliers play an integral part of any supply chain, and as such, it is important to ensure that once the most appropriate supplier is chosen, that they are developed to meet the continuously changing needs of the consumer and in turn the organization. The purpose is for the supplier to grow with the buying organization as opposed to continuously sourcing new suppliers. In this learning unit, we'll explore the importance of purchasing services and supply development. We usually are accustomed with purchasing of inventory, but the purchasing of services is a critical activity of the purchasing and supply function. Finally, we look at the supply development and the programs that an organization can engage in for the betterment of their future operations. On the completion of Chapter 16, you should be able to discuss the importance of purchasing services, explain the difference between buying services and goods, discussing the guidelines for service purchasing, explain the phases in contracting for services purchases, discuss the purchasing of consultancy and transport services. The importance of service purchases. Outsourcing of non-core activities is another management philosophy that is stimulated by the relentless global drive for cost reduction. The introduction of e-procurement and other sourcing tools has assisted supplier managers in performing procurement activities much more efficiently. The purchasing department is now positioned well to access information regarding markets for service. User departments that were traditionally assigned with the responsibility of purchasing services have recently organized the advantages of using new technology in purchasing and supply management. The nature of services in terms of the difference between buying services versus the buying of goods. Purchasing services has, until recently, not been high on the agenda of responsibilities for the purchasing and supply management. This can partially be attributed to the unique characteristics of services. The following well-established characteristics of services are identifiable. We first investigate the intangibility of the service. The implication for the purchasing and the supply management are that the specifications ought to be much more detailed and that the control over quality delivery is a subjective evaluation. There is a difficulty of standardizing services. The assessment of suppliers is a problem since it is impossible to sample a service before one is committed to a specific supplier. It may take considerable time before poor performance can be detected and remedial action can be taken. Secondly, the heterogeneity of the services. Services are unlikely to be interchangeable. This makes comparing suppliers and selecting the most suitable one a challenging task. The reputation of the supplier is providing a specific service tends to be a crucial factor in the supplier selection. Thirdly, the perishability of the services. Services cannot be stored for later consumption. Planning for the delivery of any specific service must be done with great care. The perishability influences the availability of the services in the marketplace, since the availability of the service delivery capacity may be limited at a particular time. And lastly, entry into the market. Large amounts of capital are seldom required to become a service provider. Supplier managers are often faced with the offers of many new entrants into the market without having techniques to compare and evaluate the suitability of these potential suppliers objectively. Purchase services in practice. The purchasing of services differs from purchasing of products and materials, and therefore different set of skills is needed for it to be performed efficiently. Guideline for service purchasing. The nature of services have a direct influence on the process and the structures that are required for efficient purchasing. For example, the purchasing of cleaning services where the purchasing and supply management is involved in the entire process is different from the purchasing of legal services where the expertise of the user function may be the key factor in the purchasing process. Historically, there is not generally accepted and standard process or consecutive steps for the purchasing of services due to the diverse nature. However, the following guidelines for the purchasing services will provide some assistance to the purchasing and supply management. Have a policy on compliance. Have a clearly defined scope of work. Establish a suitable organizational structure. allocate resources to the purchasing and supply management relative to the importance of service buying, develop a procedure for supplier selection and supplier base, develop a performance measurement system for service delivery, and lastly, develop a relationship with the suppliers. The core activities in service purchasing. The activities associated with purchasing services can be roughly divided into 3 phases, namely the initial phase, the purchasing phase, and the implementation phase. The initial phase. It starts off with data collection. It is essential that the buyer understand what's the scope of the demand for the service is, how much money is spent on the service company-wide, and where the main users are. The purchasing phase. Determining the supplier base, negotiations, and contract development. And the last phase, the implementation of the contract and the follow-up phase. Monitoring the results of the service buying, developing a policy of compliance for service contract performance towards suppliers, and contract execution. Purchasing consultancy services. When buying consultancy services, the consultant depends heavily on the information supplied, access to processes and procedures, key staff members, and the active participation of the user of the service for analysis of a problem situation as well as the implementation of recommendations. The service delivery process is a joint effort between the client and the consultant. Purchasing transport services. The degree to which purchasing and supply management is involved in the purchasing services depends to a large extent on the following questions. When and where should the control over transport be exercised? Should the organization make use of its own or outsourced transportation? If outsourced, should the organization contract out all elements of transport, function, or just some of them? What are the criteria that should be applied in identifying transport service suppliers? How should the organization decide when to use a particular mode of transport? What should the total expenditure on the transport function be? Purchasing services of the various types offer purchasing and supply management the opportunity to develop new applications for existing skills. Please do not forget to do the activity at the end of Chapter 16. Thank you. Suppliers play an integral part of any supply chain, and as such, it is important to ensure that once the most appropriate supplier is chosen, that they are developed to meet the continuously changing needs of the consumer and in turn the organization. The purpose is for the supplier to grow with the buying organization as opposed to continuously sourcing new suppliers. On the completion of Chapter 17, you should be able to describe the concept of supply development, discuss the activities of supply development, distinguish between reactive and proactive supply development, identify reasons for supply development, discuss the importance of supply development programs. How can we describe the concept of supply development? Literature defines supply development as an effort of a buying organization to increase the performance of its supplier. It is regarded as a long-term effort between a buying organization and its suppliers to upgrade suppliers' technical, quality, delivery, and cost capabilities. The focus of supply development is to develop 2 types of suppliers. Those who supply critical and strategic input, for example, operational products like computers and printers. Those who supply non-critical and non-strategic products, for example, cleaning products, tea and coffee. Discuss the activities of supply development. There are numerous supply development activities that may produce positive results for both buyer and supplier, including the following: sharing knowledge, sharing skills, sharing experience, activities that improve the overall performance of the supplier and the buyer, optimal investments, direct involvement in supplier activities. Distinguish between reactive and proactive supplier development. What is reactive supply development? It involves only working with the most urgent problems when they have already occurred. The organization will react to situations and thus correct mistakes made by suppliers. What is proactive supply development? Focuses on preventing future problems through long-term improvement of supplier base, creating a supplier base that provides competitive advantage for the buyer. The reasons for supplier development. To improve supplier capabilities so they provide better quality and timely delivery. To reduce costs for both suppliers and the buyer. To meet buyers' procurement targets and sustainable development objectives. To increase the supplier's profitability. The importance of supply development programs. Supply development programs involve any activities meant to develop the capabilities of suppliers within the buying organization's supply chains. In this section, we'll discuss the objectives, typology, elements, and the challenges of supply development programs. The objectives of supply development programs have two primary objectives: to reduce problems with the suppliers by making immediate changes in the supplier's operations. Secondly, to increase supplier capabilities. What are the typologies of supply development programs? Typologies of supply development can be classified as direct and indirect. Direct supply development. The buying organization plays a more active role and invests its human and capital resources in a specific supplier to solve a problem. The buying organization does not become directly involved. Supply development can also be classified as narrow and broad supply development, where narrow supply development is when passive programs that focus on preparing suppliers to join the buying organization's supply chain. For example, a website that advertises the tender process rules. The broader supply development. Activities that the buyer does with the aim of improving the supplier capabilities so that both the buyer and supplier benefit. Implementing a performance appraisal system. This chapter provided an overview of supplier development process from a purchasing and supply management perspective. Supplier development is critical in today's changing business environment, where organizations need to build relationships with capable suppliers and extract the maximum value from such suppliers. This comes to the end of purchasing management. I hope these lessons and presentations have assisted you in understanding concepts better. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.